I used to believe that success was measured by approval, by applause, by the soft nods of those who claimed to love me. For years I lived chasing that sound, hoping that one day my family would look at me and see someone worth being proud of. But that day never came. My name is Elara Vaughn, and I was the disappointment. When I was 19, my father stood at the head of our dining table and told me that dreams do not pay bills. I had just announced that I wanted to leave medical school to build something of my own. He looked at me as though I had confessed to a crime. My mother sighed into her glass of wine. My brother Noah smirked, because of course he was the golden child. He followed every rule, never questioned, never failed. I left that night with a duffel bag and a notebook full of sketches for a company no one believed in. For years, I lived in small apartments with thin walls and cheap coffee. I worked nights in cafes and mornings on my laptop designing systems that could help small businesses automate tasks that used to take days. Everyone told me I was wasting my time, but I kept building. The world changed slowly then, all at once. One afternoon, an investor from Singapore found my prototype online. He called it revolutionary. Within a year, Orion Dynamics was born. Within 3, it was worth more than I could ever imagine. But I stayed quiet. I built behind the curtain. No press, no photos, no family. No one knew that the company powering half of Asia's logistics belonged to the girl who once left med school in disgrace. They only knew me as the silent founder, a myth with no face. And I liked it that way. Then came the wedding. Invitation. I found it on a Tuesday morning, resting on my desk like a dare. Noah Vaughn and Evelyn Lee cordially invite you to their wedding. The Lee family was old money, powerful, untouchable. They owned chains of companies in every continent, and their tech division had just partnered with a rising firm called Orion Dynamics. They didn't know that I owned it. Noah probably didn't either. For a long time, I just stared at the gold lettering. Then I laughed. It had been 10 years since I last saw my family. 10 years since I walked out with nothing. Now my brother was marrying into a dynasty, and my parents would finally have the social crown they always wanted. I should have ignored the invitation. But something deep inside me whispered, go. Not for revenge, not for validation, but to face the ghosts I had outgrown. So I went. The wedding was held at the Lee family estate in Singapore. White roses lined the entrance, crystal chandeliers hung from imported oak beams. Everything shimmered in calculated perfection. Guests arrived in limousines and designer gowns. I arrived quietly in a black dress and no entourage. My mother saw me first. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. Elara, she said, what are you doing here? I smiled softly. I was invited. Her lips tightened. Well, then at least try not to embarrass us. There it was, the same tone I remembered, the same sharpness that used to slice through my heart. I didn't respond. I just nodded and walked inside. The ceremony was a spectacle. Noah stood tall beside Evelyn, both glowing in gold and white. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered. My parents sat proudly in the front row. When the vows ended, applause thundered through the hall. Everyone smiled except me. During the reception, I tried to find a quiet corner. I wasn't there to cause trouble. But trouble found me. A woman in a silver gown approached holding 2 champagne glasses. She smiled sweetly. You must be the black sheep I've heard about. I blinked. Excuse me, she laughed softly. Noah mentioned you. Said you were some kind of dropout living abroad. Brave of you to show up, though. I could have walked away. But before I could, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Noah. He looked me up and down, his smile tight, his voice dripping with politeness. Elara. You made it. I wasn't sure you'd have the time. I shrugged. You invited me, he laughed. Mother insisted. She thought it would be good for appearances. You know how she is. His words cut deeper than I wanted them to. But I stayed calm. Dinner began soon after. The tables were arranged by status, by family, by wealth. I found my name card last row near the kitchen doors. When I looked up, the servers were walking past me carrying trays. Someone had made sure I sat with them. I almost smiled. They still thought I was powerless, so I ate quietly. I listened. I watched. Halfway through dinner, the Lee patriarch rose to give a toast. His voice boomed through the grand hall. We welcome the Vaughn family into our legacy. A family built on tradition, respect, and achievement. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed again, then came my mother's turn. She thanked the Lees for their generosity, and spoke of how proud she was of her son. The doctor, the businessman, the success story. When someone asked about me, she laughed lightly and said, Elara took a different path. The words stung, but I stayed silent. Because my revenge had never been about shouting. It was about letting the truth speak for itself. An hour later, Noah came to my table. He looked irritated. You could at least try to look happy, he said. I looked up slowly. I am happy, Noah. Just not for the same reasons you are. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You should be careful around the Lees. They value success. People like you don't last long here. People like me? I repeated quietly. He smirked. The ones who quit. For a moment, I wanted to tell him everything to show him the empire I had built to watch his arrogance crumble. But I waited. The right moment always reveals itself. It came the next morning. I woke early, checked my phone, and saw an email from my assistant. The Lee Group had requested an emergency extension on their Orion Dynamics contract. $50 million at stake. Their systems were down, their deadlines looming. A simple signature from me could save them. Or destroy them. By noon, I was sitting in the Lee corporate boardroom watching chaos unfold. The executives whispered to each other, papers scattered across the table. Noah was there too, now part of their business through marriage. He looked tense. The door opened, and the Lee patriarch walked in, followed by my assistant May. Everyone turned. Mr. Lee frowned. Who is this? May smiled calmly. This is Ms. Elara Vaughn, founder and CEO of Orion Dynamics. The room went still. Noah froze, his mouth opening, then closing. My parents, who had just entered for the post-wedding meeting, looked like they had seen a ghost. I stepped forward, my voice steady. I understand you requested an extension on your contract. Mr. Lee straightened, trying to recover his composure. Yes, Miss Vaughn, Orion has been a reliable partner for years. We simply need more time, I nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty. Unfortunately, Orion does not extend contracts to companies involved in internal fraud. Silence fell like a blade. Mr. Lee blinked. I beg your pardon. I turned to Noah, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were documents, financial statements, transaction logs. Your new son-in-law has been moving company funds into private accounts under shell corporations. He used my software to cover his tracks. Unfortunately, our system noticed. Noah's face drained of color. That's a lie, he stammered. I looked at him calmly. You should know by now, Noah, my systems never lie. The board erupted. Voices clashed, accusations flew. Mr. Lee's fury echoed through the hall. My parents tried to speak, but their words dissolved in the noise. I stood still, silent, steady. Then I said softly, Orion Dynamics hereby terminates all contracts with the Lee Group effective immediately. $50 million canceled. The chaos stopped for a moment, replaced by stunned silence. Mr. Lee's voice cracked with disbelief. You cannot do this, I met his gaze. I already did. I turned to leave. Behind me, the room erupted again. My mother called my name, my father shouted about family loyalty. I didn't look back. Outside, the air was clean. The city lights shimmered like quiet witnesses. For the first time in years, I felt free. Weeks passed. News of the fallout spread fast. The Lee Group's stock crashed. Noah's fraud made headlines. My parents vanished from the social circles they once worshipped. Reporters begged for interviews, but I stayed silent. I had no interest in humiliation, only peace. One evening, months later, I heard a knock at my apartment door. It was my mother. She looked smaller, older eyes red from crying. Elara, she whispered. May I come in? I nodded and led her inside. For a long time, we said nothing. Then she finally spoke. I was wrong about you. About everything, her voice broke. I was so afraid of failure that I never saw your courage. I felt something shift inside me. Years of pain softening just a little. I poured her tea and said quietly, I didn't do any of this to hurt you. I just wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away. She nodded, tears falling silently. Can we start again? She asked. I smiled. We already have. That night I stood by the window looking out at the skyline that had once felt too high to reach. The city pulsed with light and life below me. I thought of the girl who left home with nothing but faith and fire. The girl who had been laughed at, ignored, dismissed. She had become the woman no one saw coming. And as I watched the stars reflect on the glass, I whispered to myself, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Peace is a strange thing. You wait for it, you fight for it, and when you finally have it, you don't know what to do with the silence it brings. Months had passed since the wedding and the storm that followed. The world had moved on, but I still woke up each morning wondering if it had all been real. Orion Dynamics had become stronger than ever, its value tripled, its reach expanded across continents. But power attracts enemies like light attracts moths, and somewhere in the background, someone was already trying to burn everything I had built. It started quietly. A contract was delayed. A shipment lost. A client canceled a deal without warning. My assistant May noticed the patterns first. She came into my office one morning, her eyes sharp, her tone serious. Someone is interfering with our logistics, she said. It's too organized to be random. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city skyline beyond the glass walls. Who would risk that, she hesitated. The Lee Group is gone, but some of their partners still hold grudges. Of course they did. Power never disappears, it just changes hands. I asked her to trace everything back quietly. No press, no board panic, no public statements. I wanted to know who thought they could play this game with me. While she worked, I kept moving forward. I spoke at conferences, met investors, launched new projects. Outwardly, Orion looked untouchable. Inside, I felt the old ache return, that quiet reminder that peace never lasts. Forever. Then one evening, I got a message from an unknown number. The text read, "Check tomorrow's news." I didn't sleep that night. By morning, my name was everywhere. Headlines screamed about a data breach inside Orion Dynamics. Thousands of confidential files had been leaked. Reporters circled like vultures. My phone buzzed nonstop. Investors demanded answers. Competitors cheered. May burst into my office, pale and shaking. "We've traced it," she said. "It's the Phoenix Consortium." I frowned. "Never heard of them." She nodded grimly. "You will. They're a new tech group backed by international funding. But the founder is someone you know." She slid a photo across my desk. Noah. My brother. I stared at the picture for a long time. After the wedding scandal, I thought he had vanished. But apparently he had used what little he had left to start something new, something built on revenge. And now he was coming after me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then I said calmly, "Call a board meeting. It's time we reminded the world who they're dealing with." The boardroom was tense that afternoon. The directors were nervous, whispering about the leak, the stock drop, the media chaos. I stood at the head of the table and said, "We have nothing to hide. Our systems were compromised by someone who once had access to our architecture." One of the directors interrupted. "You mean your brother?" "Yes," I said simply. Gasps around the room. I didn't flinch. I wanted them to see that I had no fear left to give. I continued, "We'll rebuild. Stronger. But we won't stoop to his level." That night, I went home exhausted. The city lights blurred outside my window. For a moment, I wondered if this was what success always led to: more battles, more loneliness, more ghosts that refused to die. Then my phone rang. "Unknown number again," I answered. His voice was calm and mocking. "Hello, sister." "Noah," he chuckled softly. "You really thought you could humiliate me and get away with it." I said quietly, "You did that to yourself." He ignored it. "You took everything from me, my reputation, my future, my family. Now I'll take what matters most to you." "You'll never win, Noah," I said. "Not like this," he laughed. "Watch me." The line went dead. I sat in the dark, my reflection staring back at me through the window. For a long time, I felt nothing. Then I remembered something my grandmother used to say when I was little. "They can take what you built, but not who you became." And that was enough to make me stand up again. The next weeks were chaos. Reporters camped outside the building. Social media burned with speculation. But through it all, Orion kept moving. Mia worked day and night, tracing every digital thread, every false trail. Finally, one evening she burst into my office with a flash drive in her hand. "We found it. she said, breathless. Proof! I opened the files. There it was. A complete map of the Phoenix Consortium's network. Hidden shell companies, offshore accounts, false licenses, all tied back to Elara Vaughn. I smiled for the first time in days. Let's send this to the authorities, I said, and make sure the press gets the right version of the story. Within a week, international headlines shifted. Phoenix Consortium exposed for cybercrime and fraud. The evidence was undeniable. Noah's name was everywhere again, but this time for all the wrong reasons. When he was arrested, I didn't feel joy, just quiet relief, because revenge had already taken enough from both of us. A month later, I received a letter from prison. It was from him. I almost threw it away, but something in me wanted closure. So I opened it. It said, Elara, you won. I don't hate you anymore. I just wish I had listened. I wanted to be like you, but I was too proud to admit it. Tell Mom I'm sorry. Noah. I folded the letter and put it away. That night, I went to see my mother again. She was staying in a small apartment now, far from the mansions and parties she once lived for. When she opened the door, she looked surprised but happy. Elara, she said softly, I didn't expect you. I handed her the letter. She read it silently, tears filling her eyes. He's still my son, she whispered. I know, I said. We sat together for a long time, saying nothing. Sometimes silence can heal more than words ever could. Weeks turned into months again. Orion Dynamics recovered completely stronger than before. I launched a foundation to help young innovators start their own companies, especially those who had been told they weren't enough. At the opening ceremony, reporters asked me if I had any regrets. I smiled and said, none. Every wound was a lesson, every loss a teacher. After the crowd left, I walked outside into the night air. The city was alive again, pulsing with energy. May joined me, smiling. You did it, she said. I looked up at the stars. Not yet, but soon. Later that year, I was invited to speak at a global summit. Leaders, investors, innovators from all over the world filled the hall. The lights dimmed. My name echoed through the speakers. When I stepped on stage, I saw thousands of faces watching, waiting. I used to think success was about proving people wrong. Now I know it's about proving yourself right. The audience was silent. I continued. They told me I couldn't build a company. I did. They told me I couldn't lead without their approval. I did. They told me family was everything. But they never told me that peace sometimes means walking alone. I paused, then said softly, and when they tried to break me, I realized that strength isn't about fighting louder. It's about standing taller. Applause filled the hall, rising like thunder. In that moment, I understood something. Simple yet powerful, revenge had started my journey, but peace had finished it. After the summit, I went home to find a small envelope waiting on my desk. Inside was a photo of me and my mother taken years ago before everything fell apart. On the back, she had written 3 words, I am proud. I smiled through tears, because for the first time in my life, I finally believed it. That night, I stood again by the window watching the skyline shimmer. The same view I had once stared at when I was just a dreamer with nothing but faith. Now I was the woman who had faced every storm and still stood tall, and as the city lights flickered like constellations below, I whispered to myself, they tried to break me, but they only taught me how to rebuild stronger. They say every empire faces its reckoning, and every heart must learn what peace truly costs. For me, that lesson came one quiet morning a year after the summit, when the world seemed calm, and the storm inside me finally slept. I had everything the world once told me I never would: power, respect, freedom. But even success has its shadows. That morning, May entered my office, her face pale, her voice shaking. Elara, she said softly, there is something you need to see. She handed me a report, pages thick, filled with numbers and projections. I scanned the first few lines and felt my chest tighten. A global crash was coming. Markets, collapsing systems, failing companies everywhere, drowning under debts and digital attacks. Orion Dynamics was stable, but only barely. We had expanded fast too fast, and our reach had made us a target again. I closed the file slowly and said, "Tell the board to prepare for impact." For days, the news was filled with panic economies, trembling governments blaming one another. Entire industries falling apart like glass investors called begging for reassurance. Clients pleaded for miracles, and through it all, I stood silent watching the storm gather again around everything I had built. May stayed by my side working day and night running numbers, calling partners, finding solutions that didn't exist yet. One evening, as the rain lashed against the windows, she said quietly, "If this continues, we will lose half our assets within weeks. Maybe more." I nodded, "I know." She hesitated, then added, "We could save the company if we sell part of it to the government. They are offering protection in exchange for control. That word tasted bitter. I had spent my life fighting to build something that was mine. Something unshackled and free. And now I was being asked to hand it over. But I also knew that hundreds of thousands of employees depended on me. Families. Entire futures built on this dream. Sometimes leadership means sacrifice, I told her. Arrange the meeting, I will decide, after I see them. The next morning, I walked into a government building. Sleek, cold, full of suits and whispers. The Minister of Technology shook my hand, smiling politely, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He said, "Miss Vaughn, we admire what you have. Built Orion Dynamics is the backbone of global infrastructure now. But these times require collaboration." I asked what kind of collaboration. He smiled wider. "One, where you let us help manage your systems in exchange for guaranteed survival." So they wanted my empire in exchange for safety. I left without answering. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city quiet below me. I thought of everything that had led here. The pain, the rise, the revenge, the peace and the question that had haunted me since the beginning. What was it all for? Then my phone buzzed a message from my mother. She had sent a photo of a small house by the sea and a note that read, "Sometimes you must lose control to keep your soul." Her words hit harder than she would ever know. The next morning, I called the minister back. I told him we would not sell, but we would help rebuild the world. Instead, he asked, confused, rebuild? I said yes. Orion will make its technology open source for all governments and small businesses, to use free of charge until the crisis ends. He was speechless. "You will lose billions," he said. I smiled softly. "Then let it be lost. Money can be rebuilt. Dignity cannot." When the news broke, it shocked the world. The woman once known for silent revenge had just given away what others would die to keep. But something unexpected happened. The move inspired other companies to follow. Investors who had abandoned us returned. Employees worked twice as hard. Nations praised Orion as the company that refused to collapse under greed in a few months. The global markets began to heal slowly but surely, and for the first time in years, people saw hope in headlines again. I had chosen peace, and peace had chosen me. Back one afternoon, I visited the seaside house from my mother's photo. She was there waiting, sitting on the porch with tea and sunlight on her face. When she saw me, she smiled that small, real smile I had not seen since childhood. She said, "You did something no one else could. You led with Hardy." Sat beside her, listening to the waves. I told her I thought success meant proving everyone wrong. But it was never about them. It was about finding myself. She took my hand and whispered, "And now you have." We sat in silence as gulls passed overhead, and the sun melted into gold. The sea stretched wide, endless like the future I no longer feared. Months later, I returned to Orion one last time. Not as its leader, but as its founder, ready to pass the torch. The boardroom was full, my team waiting there, eyes bright and proud. May stood by the window, smiling through tears. I said softly, I started this company to prove that a girl dismissed by her family could change the world. I stayed to prove that power can be kind, and now I leave to prove that peace is the final victory. There were no applause, only quiet respect, and that was enough. I handed the reins to May. She had earned it. She had believed when no one else did. As I walked out the doors of Orion Dynamics for the last time, the sky broke, open with light, and I felt the kind of calm that only comes when you know you have finished your purpose. Years passed. The world remembered the fall, the rise and the choice of one woman who turned revenge into compassion and pain into power. Orion became a symbol not just of innovation, but of integrity. It thrived under May's leadership, shaping the next generation of dreamers who refused to give up. Sometimes people still wrote to me, students, entrepreneurs, strangers, thanking me for the chance to build something of their own. They said my story gave them courage. I always wrote back with the same words: courage is not born from anger. It grows from peace. One evening I visited a small coastal school funded by the foundation I had started.